Love, start healing. Love, start healing me. Love, start healing my soul. Can you hear me, Lord? Can you hear me?
Hey listeners, you're in for a treat today. We've all heard the game and played the game hide and seek. Well, our guest today, Brenda Hudspeth, shares a unique story on how she was seeking God but couldn't seem to find Him. But ultimately, He revealed Himself in such a way that it became and is one of the major cornerstones of her faith. But before we dive into this story, I have a couple favors to ask. You know that this podcast is brand new, and I need a little help getting the message out to others. First, I would appreciate it if you would go to Facebook and like and follow the Selling Jesus page. You can find it at facebook.com/I Sell Jesus. Second, iTunes does something where they have a new and noteworthy page. You can be on this list for about 10 to 12 weeks maximum, and the way to get on the list is to have many of the listeners subscribe to the podcast and leave reviews. So if you would be so kind to go out to iTunes, please subscribe to this podcast and ultimately leave a 5-star review with a little bit of feedback and why others should listen to this show. It would be greatly appreciated. With all that said, it's now time to dive into our story. Brenda, thanks for being willing to share your journey with us today. But before we start, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. As you said, my name is Brenda, and I am married. I've been married for almost 30 years. I have two beautiful, I shouldn't say children now because they're young adults, Katie and Jenny. One has graduated from college and is working with the Children's Division in the Department of Social Services with the state of Missouri. And my other daughter is going to be in her last year of college. And I work in the day as a school counselor. And I've just started doing some counseling in the evenings with some private clients. I am very close to having my LPC, which is the certification for a licensed professional counselor. So I feel that God is leading me in that way to talk with other people and help them the best that I can.
That's excellent, and I'm sure that we're going to uncover the whole background of why you are drawn to the world of counseling at this point. Something that I'm not sure I ever shared with you, we have a connection, and my mom's name is Brenda. So, just by default, you're already one of my favorite guests on the show.
Absolutely awesome. It's an awesome name.
Everybody I know by the name of Brenda tends to be an awesome person. So it must be an awesome name.
Absolutely.
Well, Brenda, just for time's sake, because it runs out on us quickly, I want to dive in to your story. Specifically, I would like to start with what your life was like, really as a child, a young adult, and specifically where Christ fit into the equation. Was Christ a part of your upbringing or not?
Okay, I would have to say that no, Christ was not a part of my upbringing. I did not attend Sunday school, Bible school, any type of church like I knew that some of my friends did. My mom and dad were not, religious in the fact that they did not attend church. We didn't really talk about God in our household. It was looked upon as a very private thing. That was a private thing that you really didn't talk about. But at the same time, they brought me up to have a respect for God. And so I knew that there was a God, and I knew that there was a powerful God, but that we just didn't really bother him because he had important things to do. So that's kind of how I feel like I was brought up. My dad was a Marine, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. I had two brothers and a sister who were quite a bit older than me. So I had a pretty typical upbringing. I felt loved. I felt supported. And I had quite a bit of independence. But no, God really did not play a part in my upbringing.
I have to ask, because so many church-going people feel that, I think assume that everybody is brought up in a home that at least talks about Jesus. It's hard for us to believe that, or remember that some homes, although God may be a part of the conversation, it's not a primary part of the conversation. Ultimately, where I'm going with the question is, did you have students, classmates growing up that shared their faith with you that gave you a little more conversation about God during your school years?
Actually, no. Actually, no, until, well, I say no early on. I did get involved with some friends, and we started attending a youth fellowship. Basically, when we were in middle school, early high school, and this was basically just, it was a social club, but actually got me involved with some pretty good kids. But the focus, really, I have to say, was not on God. In my opinion, anyway, it was kind of a social kind of party type of atmosphere. In fact, some of the influences from that group were not that great. However, when I look back, I can really see God setting things up through these friends and through this youth group.
One of the things I think most students are fearful of is just rejection. Quite frankly, I think we as human beings are afraid of rejection. So the idea of sharing our faith is a scary idea. We're afraid someone will say, "What are you doing? I'm not interested." And we feel there may be conflict, so we just avoid it by not saying anything about what we believe or what we may be passionate about inside. Going back, how would you have responded? And maybe this is a hard question, but how would you have responded to another student talking about Jesus?
At the time that I really felt God was calling me, I actually was asking some of the kids in the youth group around me some different questions about the things of God, and they really weren't that interested in pursuing, you know, or having me pursue a relationship with God. They, I guess, were just kind of distracted. So I kept seeking. I remember going to a leader in that church, asking them questions, and letting them know that I was feeling a call to religious things or to God. And at that point, this adult told me that pretty much I didn't need to worry so much about it.
Wow, and I think I just understood why members of your family are so involved in ministering to youth.
Uh-huh. Yes.
May I ask about what age you were when you started, I'm going to call it seeking, or started asking questions, more questions about God?
I would say I'm trying 16. 17 is where I really started getting, I really felt this call. I just felt in my heart that I was not serving God and that I needed to seek Him and I needed to change some things in my life in order to get closer to God and to focus on the things of God.
I'm making a little bit of an assumption, but you strike me as that person who is just a really good person. You said you were raised in a good home, a loving home. You were taught respect. So you were just what we would call that good girl, but yet you did not have faith. Can you give me a little more insight to what life was like before you ultimately made a decision to follow Christ?
Sure. You know, me, my friends, we were the model students. We were very polite, very respectful on one hand, but on the other hand, I don't know any other word to say, but we were pretty naughty and we were getting into some pretty, um, just risky behavior. Now, my mom never knew about this. No one ever knew about the things that we were doing because, frankly, I didn't want to worry my mom. Without going into a lot of detail, my dad died. My brother moved out of the home, both of my brothers. So it was just my mom and I living at home. And I knew that she was working hard, trying to take care of me. And I didn't want to worry her or bother her. So I really got pretty good at lying about where I was, what we were doing with my friends. And so, the behavior was just a little bit more adult than what we should have been involved in at, say, 15, 16.
And I'm going to go with probably pretty common behavior, however, for most average 15, 16, 17-year-old students today.
Absolutely. Same thing. Hanging around with older kids, not being where we should have been, a little bit of drinking. Thank goodness, not, we didn't. Even then, I can look back and see how I could have really got myself in some big trouble. But even then, I know that God had His hand of protection upon me to keep me until the time that I gave my life to Him.
It's amazing how He covers our entire journey. And that's one of the reasons why I focus on this podcast being about the entire journey of faith. I'd like to dive into the emotions, if you can remember these. Specifically, here you are as a 16, 17-year-old, I'm going to call you a normal student, good at school, doing things that maybe are not wise in all cases. Then on the flip of that, you've already stated that you had an interest in God. You were seeking answers in God, but not getting a lot of attention from either youth leaders or even other peers who may be professing that they are Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Emotionally, how did that make you feel? Can you remember, were you okay with that, or was that frustrating at all?
Oh, absolutely. It was so, so frustrating. And I remember very distinctly one day, I grew up in Florida, and so I was actually on the beach running one afternoon along the beach. And I was just, all these thoughts were going through my head. I really felt that I just there was a longing and a wanting to know God. And I was so frustrated, and I was thinking, well, okay, what church do I go to? There are 15 churches. God, what, I mean, I don't know where to find you. I don't know where you want me. I know you're calling me, but I don't know what to do. And I remember just sitting down on the sand and just sobbing and saying, God, you need to tell me what I'm supposed to do.
I apologize for the pause. This is just an impressive image in my mind. And a lot of it goes to my passion for the beach and the passion for the ocean. And there is something about being on the beach and hearing the ocean, the crashing waves, looking out to a massive expanse of nothing but water. And I personally find any time I'm on a beach a very spiritual moment, because it to me shows there is a God. There's a power that is so much bigger than I. And on the flip to that, here I see a picture of a young lady seeking God, feeling called by God, yet frustrated by the myriad of choices out there, not knowing where to go and not getting help from anyone. So now walk me to the point. I know you're on this podcast because you're following Christ at this point. Keep walking me to what took place. This drawing, it sounds like the drawing was truly of the Holy Spirit ministering upon your heart. Take me to how you ultimately found God.
Well, and this will tell you, I think, why I am so passionate about public education. After a few days after that, I went to high school. That day, I was in the band. In fact, I was the drum major in the band. And I felt a very close connection with the band director. And I will tell you his name. His name was Mr. Schubel. And he just was a great guy, had a connection with the kids, and his family was very involved. He had a wife who was involved and the cutest little daughter. And I had babysat for them a few times. In fact, I had read some literature that they had out at their house, some different books on the coffee table that were religious. And that prompted, I think, some of my questions. But one day, I was just having a pretty bad day at school. In fact, some of the kids were acting up, and me as drum major, I had to actually reprimand them. And they kind of got mad at me, and I was frustrated. So Mr. Schubel called me into his office, and he said, "Hey," he said, I guess you're not having a very good day." I said, "No, I'm not. He goes, "Well, what's up?" I said, "I'm just so frustrated with things. I just, I don't know." And he said, "Brenda," he said, "I think I know why you're frustrated." And he said, "God told me that you asked him the question of what you needed to do to be saved and to have a relationship with him." And Mr. Schubel said, "I would like to invite you over for dinner. You're welcome to bring your mom or any of your friends." And he said, "I'd be happy to open up the Bible and show you what I know about becoming closer to God and having a relationship with God." Scott, at that moment, I almost fell backwards. It was like the exact words and verbiage. And I knew right then this man had something to tell me from God.
Is it because you felt like he knew something that he shouldn't have known, specifically your conversation on the beach? Or is it just the fact that...
No.
So he heard from God, and he was willing to put himself out there and let you know he had heard from God.
Absolutely. There was no doubt in my mind that God had heard my prayer, and he had sent this person to tell me what God wanted me to know.
Wow. All right, so Brenda, I'm going to assume that this dinner you had with your band instructor and his family ultimately led you to making a decision to follow Christ.
Yes. Um, yes, that is correct. In fact, he shared with me some scriptures. And, I, to me, the specific scriptures and the specific church that he attended, because those were my questions. What church you go? And he said, you know what? I don't want you to really focus on that. And thinking back, man, that was so wise. And he said, I want you to focus on your relationship with God and turning your heart over to him. And I'm sure I can't remember this specifically, but I know that we prayed the sinner's prayer that night. I did not ask my mom. I did not ask my friends. I felt that it was a private thing at that point. Um, so it was just me and his family, and I just really felt a immediate connection with God. And yes, this now I feel satisfied. I did end up attending. I don't think he told me. I think he made me kind of sleuth it out to figure out where he went to church, and I started attending that church and got involved in that church, and it helped me to break away from some of the negative influences and some of the negative behaviors. And I ended up attending that church for a couple of years before I went off to college. The other thing, which is so, I think, really neat, is after I became a disciple of Christ, I guess I can call it, I actually witnessed or talked to some of the band kids and some of my friends. I was dating a guy at the time, and they actually turned their life over to God, and they're still serving God to this day.
Wow. Some might say, hey, I don't know enough about the Bible to actually share it with anyone. You took a newfound passion, and started sharing right away. Did you have those same fears, or was it just so real to you that you just had to share?
It was very real to me. And something that happened is it was kind of like an immediate conversion that got attention of my friends around me. In fact, they were like, oh, really, come on, you're not gonna, oh, you don't be silly, you're young. And I said, no, I just feel very strongly that we should not be involved in the things that we're involved in. We need to turn our hearts towards God, and we need to serve God. And because of such, I mean, they were very nice about it. I do know now that some of the kids and my friends were kind of, making fun of me. And, I felt that I lost some friends through this, but to me, it did not matter. I knew that I had prayed to God. God had answered my prayer, told me what to do, and I knew that this is what I needed to do.
How many years would you say this journey of faith, at least your initial decision to follow Christ, how many years did that encompass? Because you had mentioned you had been feeling called by God for years before you
hmm
found anyone willing to actually help you find him. How many years was that journey?
I would say about 2 years. hmm About 2 years that I was seeking and searching. A little bit more, and I just feel that God was directing my path for about 2 years.
And so when you finally made that decision to follow Christ, it just became so real to you on the inside that your story was enough that you were able to get past lost friendships. You were able to get past
Mhm.
being made fun of because you just knew inside, due to your story,
Mhm.
God was real and this was what was right for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had a longing, and I didn't really even know I had this longing until this longing just welled up in me. And once I had that longing for God, I just kept seeking and searching until I had that filled. And once I had it filled, I knew that God had directed my path. I had no question in my mind. In fact, when I would maybe wonder, oh, do I really need to be this strict? Do I really need to not be involved in these things that my friends are involved in? All I had to do was think back to that moment on the beach and my prayer, then think about how my prayer was answered, and then I knew in my mind that that was not a coincidence. I had not been talking to my band teacher about God and religious things at all. This just came out of the blue. So it was like, boom, no doubt in my mind that I'm on the right path. I may not understand it, but just keep walking. God is going to keep leading you to where He needs to lead you.
All right, so here you are, you're in your upper teens, you made this decision to follow Christ, you're nearing your time to go to college, which is a very difficult time frame for most students.
Mm-hmm.
Keep walking me through this journey. It sounds like
Sure.
you made a switch overnight in many ways, but I don't think anyone
Mm-hmm.
does overnight. There's always challenges, there's always temptations.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of briefly walk me through the next 5, 10, 15 years of your growth with Christ, or what we'll call your discipleship.
Sure. I actually went away to college, but before I went away to college, I feel like I just had wisdom beyond my years, and it was because of the good support and good relationship and leadership that I had, in the church that I attended. It's just some great mentors. So they did encourage me. Yes, you go to college, but make sure that you are set up. Do you have a church? Do you have a spiritual support family that can help you? And I did. I moved up there. I roomed with a young lady from a church in the area that I went to college at, and I just continued learning and growing in, um, in wholesome activity and wholesome growth. And then I actually graduated. I became a elementary school teacher. I got my degree. And then I continued working for a few years there at the town where I went to college, and I was involved in church, and I served in church and, volunteered and just really worked on myself at growing in my relationship with Christ and being a good, a good, I shouldn't say a good person, but the person that I wanted to be in Christ, helping others and serving the community.
So you just grew through college, you grew through your adult life, you got married, you've had children, you have just continually grown. For those that are in a similar position, and maybe they're discouraged because they either went through or going through a difficult time, were there any rough patches along the way?
You know, we've experienced the death of quite a few family members in our family, grandmas, my mom, my sister, my dad when I was younger. We've experienced quite a bit of loss as a family. Those were always hard times to go through. Um, but to tell you the truth, it was such a dramatic way that I felt like God showed himself to me, that has been something that no matter what I've been involved in, I can look back to that day on the beach, to how God fulfilled the prayer or answered my prayer. And then in my mind, I've always been able to say, there is no way that was a coincidence. I know that God is directing my paths. So just hang on, even if it's rough, even if it's shaky, stay in the boat. Keep your course. Keep following, and God will get you through this too.
So no matter what rough patch you went through, what moment of questioning you may have gone through over the years, that moment on the beach and the answer to that prayer has been your cornerstone, that foundational piece of your faith, of being able to hold to that and say, this God that I serve is alive, and I'm going to hold on regardless.
Correct. And it's not holding on to one specific church, one specific person, one specific doctrine, but it's one specific relationship with my God. That is what has got me through. Other things have changed and have looked different. In fact, I feel like there have been some things that I've grown in, maturity in my relationship with God. But God has never changed. And my relationship to me, directly to him, that is what has been my focus.
That's very awesome. Now, Brenda, our journey never ends. The ending day will be when we meet Jesus face to face. You started off this podcast by telling us that you're a school counselor. You are now moving into doing some private counseling. I know that's what God has for you here in the future. It's where you're headed. Why counseling, though? What has drawn you to that? And where do you see God taking you with this here in the near future?
Well, think about this. Being in a room with another individual, and I counsel adults, teenagers, children. These kids and people are in such pain. Most of them, that's why they've sought me out or sought out a counselor. And, I'm able to just let them know that, number one, there's hope. Hang on. There can be an answer. Let's explore your options. Don't give up. I kind of feel like I am having them hang on so that God can call them and deal with them the way that he did with me. I am not a Christian counselor. I do not bring up a specific church or a specific doctrine. However, we do talk about God and, is he a part of their life? And if they say yes, we kind of explore that as being a coping mechanism for them and a strength that they can turn to God and pray and ask him for his guidance. But for some other people, I think I'm just helping them to hold on another day and go forward and realize, you know what? God, some way, somehow, can reach that person. It may be me, it may be someone else, but hold on. People care about you. Just there is hope. Hang on.
Maybe to finish here for everyone listening, One of the main goals behind this Selling Jesus podcast is to help those who are following Christ share their faith. I cannot say that enough. So, in sales, one of the main strategies is just taking the time to listen to someone and understand their needs and their problems, their hurt or their pain. And then after you finally understand that, you are able to offer a solution that could help with that. In your experience with all the clients, would you say that there is a lot of hurt and pain out there in this world, and Jesus could fix a lot of the problems?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I think that me personally, knowing what I know and my experience, I have no doubt that that is the answer. Now, getting people to that answer and to that solution, I think comes in a variety of ways. Like I said, I had no religious formal training, upbringing. God, I felt, just somehow called me, or I sought after him. I'm not sure how that all works, but it was undeniable that, boom, it was there. I think in the beginning, without anyone influencing me. So when I'm talking with people, I try to be very sensitive to the fact that I don't know how they're going to get to this relationship with God, but I do know that it is possible. So I'm going to do my best to kind of hang on, help them to hang on, help them to keep themselves healthy and safe and viable for God to do a miraculous work in their life.
I think for me, the one thing I've really taken from this story, Brenda, is that God may be speaking to more people than we know. He's calling them. In fact, the Bible says that he pursues us and he calls us. He chooses us. And in doing that, there are many individuals out in this world who may be going through the same exact emotions you were going through as a young person, feeling this call of God and just not having any idea what to do with it, where to go with it. And I know it's easy for us to say, well, they should go to church, but by golly, which church do I choose? You go to a bookstore and you see 100 Bibles. Which Bible do I choose? It's very confusing. And I will tell you, I've been in church my entire life, and I hate going to new churches because it just makes me feel uneasy. So I can only imagine how difficult it might be for someone who has never even stepped in a church. What I've drawn out of this is it's important for us to step out on faith as well. And when we see someone who may be hurting, maybe we're having a conversation with that cashier and we hear about hurt going on in his or her life, to step out and just ask if we can pray with them. Ask if we can share a little bit about our Jesus. And we might be surprised at how many prayers we're answering just by having a little faith when we step out.
Absolutely. I think that when you have a feeling or an instinct or a urging to reach out to someone, even complete strangers, in kindness, I think that that is an expression and an extension of God's hand. Sometimes it's to the point that you can say, hey, let me pray with you. Sometimes maybe it's just another kind word or a kind gesture. But when we show kindness and love, we're showing them God. And it, I think, is helping them to hang on, to move forward, for God to actually move in their life and do something great in their life.
Brenda, you've encouraged me today, specifically encouraged me to be more willing to step out of my own comfort zone and just be willing to share with others at any day, any spot, any place, because we never know what God is doing on the inside at any given moment. So I appreciate that. For now, we do need to call this episode a close, and I just want to thank you once again for sharing your story and providing some additional insights for us on how to share our faith.
Thank you, Scott. It has been my privilege.